I'd say it's a road movie, or it's a horror film. A lot of killing goes on.
It's a very emotional ride. It's a very primitive ride.
It's like a rabbit chase through Texas. And what happens to the characters is unbelievably dramatic.
It's a crime story.
The Mexican brown dope.
In some ways it's a Western because of the terrain and the setting. In some ways it feels a little bit like a noir.
There's a good deal of humor in it, so you could call it a comedy.
You know how many people I know in El Paso, Texas? That's how many.
It's a very powerful story about violence, where any option can be taken.
Where are you going?
I don't know.
I'd say it's a horror comedy chase. Who are these people?
I think it's a Coen Brothers film.
Call it. Call it.
They're their own genre.
No Country for Old Men, the novel by Cormac McCarthy, is a book that the producer Scott Rudin had brought to us, thinking we might have an affinity for it, and we did. At a basic level, liking it as a book and thinking that maybe we could do something with it. It was begging to be made into a movie.
It read like a treatment for a screenplay, to me, but a screenplay for a very good movie. It was unlike anything Cormac has written before. A chase kicked off by a drug deal gone bad.
It just seemed interesting in a genre way, but also interesting because it kind of subverts the genre expectations too. It's kind of a chase, but the bad guy actually never catches up to the good guy.
I thought it was a very powerful story. And in the hands of the Coens, that story can be really powerful and deep.
It's the sort of material that plays to a lot of their strengths. And it's a very cinematic book.
We're rolling. Hey. And action.
We'd done our first movie in Texas. It is a place that we kind of knew and were certainly attracted to before we read the book, so that was another incentive for us to do the story.
As far as where you are at the end, you don't have to be in any specific place. Let's see where it times out.
Here's how it's different for us, just in terms of the experience of making the movie. The three main guys never have scenes together because one is pursuing the other.
We don't cross paths, which is one of the points that I think is more interesting in the story, that we really don't interact with each other, even if we are looking for each other the whole movie.
It's basically a chase story. The Javier Bardem character chasing the Josh Brolin character, with Tommy Lee Jones bringing up the tail.
It is a dark story, and the book is quite dark, and that's the defining characteristic of it.
The book is one of the most amazing stories that I've read in a long time. I identified with each character and different circumstances or situations that I would put myself in.
If I don't come back, you tell Mother I love her.
Your mother's dead, Llewellyn.
Well, then I'll tell her myself.
There was a somewhat lengthy search to decide who would play Llewellyn Moss. You need someone who seems ruggedly competent in a way, the real person who understands the country and really seems like they're from the country.
We thought it'd be really easy because in our minds it's kind of the regular guy, and we thought, well, you know, we just need a good, clean kid. It turns out it's not that easy to embody that without either being dull or being not of the region, which is a bad thing because...
Not convincing as a cowboy in a way.
We were extremely fortunate to come across Josh, who is the perfect choice. You really feel like this is a Texan.
He wore the cowboy hat before he showed up for this part. I mean, he really just kind of fit in really naturally.
Reset to go again, please.
I grew up working hard on a ranch, and I know these guys really, really well. Moss is just a compilation of a lot of guys that I grew up with.
Ready?
All these guys would do exactly the same thing given this circumstance.
Action!
Moss is a backwoods country boy who's never had any money. He knows where there's heroin and a drug bust going bad, there's got to be money somewhere.
And so he sees the money and thinks, well, nobody's here, there's no witnesses, and he almost sort of gets away with it.
The book was about a good guy, a bad guy, and a guy in between, and he's kind of the guy in between.
Right, just sort of regular person who's caught up in extraordinary circumstances and spends the rest of the movie trying to sort of avoid the consequences.
Moss was going through 2 tours in Vietnam, so he can take care of himself, absolutely. When you experience this character, Sugar, who's basically the devil incarnate, you think there's no way this guy's gonna make it.
You know Anton Chigurh by sight?
Yes, sir. I know him every which way.
Just how dangerous is he?
Compared to what? The bubonic plague?
He's described in the book as someone without a sense of humor. But beyond that, he's not described very extensively. We needed an actor who would be able to flesh it out in a substantial way without giving away too much. Hence, Javier Bardem.
I'm looking for Llewellyn Moss.
Well, I'd say he's at work. Do you want to leave a message?
Where does he work?
I can't say.
Where does he work?
As an actor, I always try to find the character circumstances. Here with the Coens, we realized that we don't need to know everything about Anton Chigurh because that's his power. You cannot really understand him completely. He doesn't need to be explained.
He is supposed to be sort of unplaceable ethnically, nationally. He's the one character who's not a local, not a West Texas person. So Javier sort of fit the bill in that regard. He's clearly, it is mysterious where he's from, but it's not West Texas.
It's been really wonderful to watch Javier because those of us on the crew, I think, didn't quite know what to expect. And it's such a fantastic, enigmatic character that he's created.
Call it. Call it, yes.
Anton Chigurh only believes in one thing, which is fate.
I need to know what I stand to win.
Everything.
How's that?
You stand to win everything, call it.
And he uses this coin toss in order to show the other people that their life and death belongs to destiny itself.
Well done.
There's an openness to him that makes it far more scary than if somebody just gave a look. I'm gonna kill you look, you know? You don't understand it, you can't pigeonhole it, you can't categorize it. He brings this soul to it that it makes it very eerie.
Do you have any idea how crazy you are?
You mean the nature of this conversation?
I mean the nature of you.
All right, here we go.
And roll, please.
Rolling. Quiet, please. Hey. And action.
Well, it's a mess, ain't it, Sheriff?
If it ain't, it'll do till the mess gets here.
Tommy's character is the center of the movie. Sheriff Bell's a very decent kind of guy.
Salt of the earth, and yet very capable sheriff.
And the part requires the kind of subtlety that only a really, really great actor can bring to it.
Somebody unloaded on that thing with a shotgun.
I suppose I have played several Texas law enforcement officers, and actors live in constant fear of being typecast. But the attraction of working with Cormac McCarthy's material was overwhelming.
There's just a very, very few people who can carry a movie like this and also be in a real sort of fundamental way convincing as being of the region.
Well, this is just a deal gone wrong, isn't it?
Yeah. Appears to have been a glitch or two.
In a strange way, that part of it didn't have to be acted by Tommy, like it would have been necessary for any number of other actors.
Tommy Lee, he's a great hybrid of incredible smarts and a country boy. He's from San Saba County, and that's where Llewellyn Moss is from, and he couldn't help but remind me of that many times.
600-pound steer, you can slaughter a 600-pound steer. That makes sense.
Right. Oh, okay.
Yeah, that steer is great. He's of the region to sort of his core, and the region is so much a part of the character.
A character belongs in a place. You have to work hard to make a character look as if he belongs in a place. And I enjoy working in West Texas a great deal. I love that country. It's my home, and it makes it, for me, a very comfortable movie set.
Of course, they slaughter steers a lot different these days. Use an air gun. Shoots out a little rod about that far into the brain, sucks right back in. Animal never knows what hit him.
Why are you telling me that, Sheriff?
You can't really act the region. That's why we cast Kelly Macdonald, who happens to be a Scottish actress from Glasgow. And I was very skeptical about it because I just didn't believe she could play a gal from West Texas. And every now and then you come across someone who just has that sort of facility with accents and is that good an actor.
She's gotten the West Texas accent down perfectly. Between takes, she's this sweet little girl from Scotland. And when the camera turns on, she's this pretty tough West Texas gal.
What's in the satchel?
It's full of money.
That'll be the day.
Carla Jean is married to Llewellyn, and it's a really sweet relationship, actually. You get the sense that they're very well matched, and she can give as much as, you know, he can take. There's kind of a nice banter between them.
Keep running that mouth of yours, I'm gonna take you in the back and screw you.
Big talk.
Keep it up.
They don't have that many scenes together in the movie.
Llewellyn?
What we tried to convey in the few short scenes that they have together is that they have a very close relationship.
What am I supposed to tell Mama?
She tries standing in the door and hollering, Mom, I'm home.
Llewellyn?
Come on, pack your things.
He wants better things for his wife. He wants to be able to create a better life for them and to make her happy.
I got a bad feeling, Llewellyn.
Well, I got a good one, so that ought to even out.
She's just a very normal young woman. They live in a trailer and kind of have a pretty sedate life.
She lives in a trailer, you know, double wide out in the trailer park in Sanderson, Texas, and works at Walmart. I don't know if it's a cliche, but at least people recognize what we're talking about.
The story is about where it takes place as much as anything else.
So the location becomes a huge, important character or element in the story, and it can't be separated from the story.
It was very important to us that we shoot at least the stuff where you really get a feel for the landscape in West Texas.
It's a primitive landscape. It's a survivalist landscape. And that's what the whole story revolves around. It revolves around surviving. And when you live off the land, it's all about the elements. You go with the flow. You have lightning happening over here, it's sunny over here, it's 120 over here, and then it's 50 degrees that night. It's constantly changing.
West Texas is a really beautiful place and a really remote place. We shot some of the movie based out of Marfa.
And that poses its own set of challenges because Marfa is really, it's out there. It's about 3.5 hours from El Paso and about 3.5 hours from Midland, and it's very harsh country, but really gorgeous in a lot of ways. And so we were able to go there and shoot a lot of the wide exterior stuff that really tries to set the mood and give you sort of feel for where the story really takes place.
That looks like about a 77 Ford to you, Wendell.
It could be.
I'd say it is, not a doubt in my mind.
It was a little strange discovering that we were making a period movie set in 1980, because in a way we don't associate that with period in the sense that you think of period movies. Still, a surprising number of sort of design elements have to be manipulated to make it convincing.
This structure is the American side of the border crossing into Mexico. The whole thing was prefabbed at the stages that we're shooting on, but now we're in the process of putting the set dressing on there and making it seem like it's been here for 26 years. Taking the movie back 26 years definitely makes it harder. There's all the period vehicles that you have to find. They're all 70s or 80s vintage cars, and they're all this West Texas color palette that I had in mind.
It's a little more tricky than doing something from the 19th century because that's, you know, a complete different time. And 1980 is not that far in the past, but it's far enough in the past that it's a little tricky to find things from that time.
You got a pair of Larry Mann's, shoulder size 11?
I'll check.
It's before the internet, no cell phones. People didn't have to necessarily keep up with the fashion of the time, so they were looking very much like they did 10 years prior, some people 20 years prior.
It's not often you see a Mexican in a suit.
In West Texas, in the summertime, people wear straw cowboy hats because it's hot, and our movie takes place in the summertime. So Moss and Bell wear straw hats. But Sugar was, to me, the one that was left most wide open. He's a fish out of water, a criminal that was from another part of the country or another country entirely. Sugar is trying to fit in, so he has a denim jacket, but it's not like one that anybody else would wear. And he's a little bit more in with the times. His collar is a little bit bigger. He's got like one of those groovier belts. It's not a Western belt. And then I knew that he should have a boot that was almost like a weapon, and with a toe and a very slanted heel, and just sort of made you kind of cringe if you look at them. And so we actually made them out of alligator, and they're like bumpy and gross and pointy, and they could kill someone.
You know how this is gonna turn out, don't you?
Nope.
And his haircut was so right, and I knew it, and he knew it, and Joel and Ethan just started laughing in a good way.
Well, he has just a fantastic haircut.
Yeah. Javier loved the haircut.
His character has really evolved into this other thing. What we're doing to him and his look, would have never have thought that for the character. Didn't imagine that when we were, reading the script.
There's Llewellyn there.
He's somebody who needs to be able to blend into the environment where he goes. The fun thing about it is he doesn't blend at all. There's a scene in the film where the crime scene takes place. And when our character Moss first approaches it, there's bodies everywhere on the ground and a dead dog, a pit bull. And we've had to create all these bodies.
That looks good, Christian.
And the challenging thing was to create these bodies to feel bloated, dead, and burnt by the sun. It's because what happens to a body in the desert after 2 days is pretty horrific.
How's everything, you think, looking?
I think it looks fantastic.
Okay.
The sort of almost excessive nature of the blood and the violence in the movie obviously makes for some strange moments on the set.
There have been many wonderful moments. Steve Root getting shot in the throat and gurgling. We shot Javier performing field surgery on himself in a crappy motel room. The prosthetic wound and all this sort of...
blood everywhere.
And with the opening scene, we just kind of leap right into the mayhem, and it sort of establishes the bad guy's character in a kind of graphic way.
I got it under control. The thing that surprised all of us, I think, was the opening violence, strangling the deputy with the handcuffs. And it sounded like, it's a tussly kind of fight thing. No big deal. Oh, man.
I was talking to Joel and he goes, we're gonna choke him. He's gonna die. His neck's gonna split open. There's gonna be some blood. And this has to be the most violent scene in the film. This has to be the most horrific, torturous, sort of choking scene ever seen.
And so the question was how to make that look real and brutal without hurting either of the actors. Because to put any pressure on someone with a pair of handcuffs, your wrists go numb after a couple of seconds. You can't really feel anything with your fingers there, can you? With this hand?
Handcuffs are not designed to be comfortable. So once you get down on the ground, the handcuffs pinch the arms and are on pressure points. If he's not pulling hard on the handcuffs, then it doesn't look like he's really hurting the guy. And then if he's pulling hard on the handcuffs, he's hurting himself.
And we built this harness to the actor, which looked like something the Terminator would have. It had metal braces around the neck and the handcuffs attached to that. And then we created prosthetics that would fit over all this and try to make it look natural. Sugar has his handcuffs wrapped around the deputy, and he's violently throwing them around the room by the neck. And as the chain digs into the skin, he eventually gives it a good twist, and the skin pops, and the artery bursts, and blood starts to come out. Give it to the brothers for shooting it in a way that I think sells the effect correctly.
There's something about it that's a little like a horror movie. There are things that are sort of similar to what we've done before and things that are very different.
A lot of this stuff is very procedural, people doing things to cover their tracks or track the other two people. It's all very, much of the
about
movies...
physical activity in order to achieve a purpose, which honestly we've sort of always been fascinated by.
The pharmacy explosion was a little tricky just because you're working in a public street. You have cars going by, stunt guys on the walkway, and then the crews in the store.
So when you step down, sort of a quick look that way and that way, definitely.
The whole thing comes from the original storyboard of the car blow-up scenes. So you start with the story elements where he makes a fuse and lights the gas cap, and it's all on the actor's cue.
Action.
So even the door that he's opening is loaded with materials. And even though one car explodes, we had 5 large plate glass windows to drop at the same time as if there was a concussion wave coming out of the car. You just kind of sandwich all the effects into it so it's not a big threat to anybody, but it's still visually filling the frame. Working with the Coens, it's always, let's take it a little further as we get a little more into the art of it rather than churning it out by body count.
Take the gun out again, grab onto the thing, gun's drawn. Yeah, that's great.
Most of the special effects are related to the shotgun fights.
The weapons involved were a big deal.
Let's talk to Jerry. I'm a little worried about that.
All the guns the actors used. McCarthy's very detailed in his description about what the guns really were. Moss has a basic hunting rifle.
You hold still.
It's a Remington 700, but that's the same kind of weapon that Army snipers used. And he was a Vietnam vet, so that tied together.
12 gauge. You need shells? Yeah, 00.
Moss takes a shotgun and saws it off in the motel room.
So you want this to fall from this to that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Quiet, please.
McCarthy didn't really say what it was, but when he said he worked the pump and let the hammer down, there's only one shotgun I knew that, that did that. It was a Winchester Model 97. And so that's what we went with.
That's a cut.
Moss has to kind of work for his weapons. Sugar just somehow seems to pull them out of thin air. Just whatever kind of killing thing that he needs. He has this shotgun with this silencer on it, which is a real unusual weapon, and we had to have that specially made to accommodate the description.
What is that?
I need you to step out of the car, sir.
This cattle gun that he uses.
What is that for?
Oh yes, the bolt gun. It's modeled after the device used to kill cows, which is a steel bolt that goes through the skull. So we sort of took the look and made a set of guns, one that has an air cylinder in it to knock locks apart. And then the other one was a recoil model that would shoot backwards, so the actor had something to work with and he didn't have to totally mime it.
It's as close as we'll come to a kind of action movie, although it is and it isn't. But like I say, it's the closest we'll come.
I think No Country for Old Men is a very simple story, but in the Coen's hands, it's very complex in the way they shot it, in the way they go farther with their characters, and it's fun to watch, even if it's violent, because the story is about violence.
The movie is by far the most violent movie we've ever made. It was different. I mean, it was different from anything we've done before.
Once again, it belongs to the Coens.